Ideas have far longer shaped the course of history than history itself. And as John Keynes once said, the difficulty lies not so much in new ideas as in escaping from the old ones. We have gathered here today to discuss and deliberate ideas on today's theme, the blue economy. A very good morning to all present here. I, Anandita Jain, and my co-host, Adhira Choradia, on behalf of SIIB, welcome you all, esteemed dignitaries, faculty members, staff, members of the media, and my fellow students to the Leadership Series 2017, our flagship event.
Dream, dream, and dream, and convert these into thoughts and later into actions. We must think like a nation of 1 billion people. Only then we can become big. These are the inspiring words of our former president, Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam. At Symbiosis Institute of International Business, one of our greatest strengths lies in our ability to give the students an opportunity to learn from world-class leaders and corporates. The SIIB Leadership Series every year focuses on the most pressing issues of the time. In the past, Leadership Series has focused on the Arab Springs, possibilities in Africa, building partnerships with Europe, ASEAN, beyond looking east, and finally, the topic for this year, blue economy. As a pre-event to this, we also had a session with Mr. Arun Firodia, Chairman, Kinetic Group.
Before moving further, we now present to you a short video to introduce the audience to the agenda under discussion.
The underwater world remains the Earth's last truly unexplored frontier. The oceans have long been the center of economic activity. People have been living near the sea, feeding themselves by fishing, and making their livelihoods on the coast for thousands of years.
Look at small island countries as large ocean states with vast potential. We are pleased that sustainable use of oceans and marine resources is a distinct element in the Sustainable Development Goals in the United Nations that were finalized recently.
The ocean connects major sea routes like the Middle East, Africa, and East Asia with Europe and America. It helps in meeting the energy needs of many countries by transporting petroleum and petroleum products from the oil fields of the Persian Gulf and Indonesia. The Indian Ocean is a great source of oil, wealth, and heavy minerals. It is estimated that 40% of the world's offshore oil production comes from the Indian Ocean. It carries half of the world's container ships, 1/3 of bulk cargo traffic, and 2/3 of the world's oil shipments.
Despite the globalized emphasis of China's alternative economic governance, such as the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank and the Asia Development Bank, and the initiation of localized development strategies, including OBOR, CPEC, and Bangladesh-China-India-Myanmar Economic Corridor, Beijing has actually been gearing towards resolving an even greater geostrategic problem for China's future growth, coined by the Chinese President Hu Jintao as the Malacca Dilemma. It refers to the Straits of Malacca, located between the Malaya Peninsula and the Indonesian island of Sumatra, which provide China with its shortest maritime access to Europe, Africa, and Middle East. The reason why these traits are so important is that roughly 80% of China's Middle Eastern energy imports also pass through this narrow stretch of water.
We would now request the Director, Symbiosis Institute of International Business, Dr. Asmita Chitnis ma'am, to kindly escort our dignitaries for the lighting of the lamp.
I thought he's coming to tell us something. Already killing me. Thank you all. We would now request our guests to kindly take their seats on the stage. We now request Dr. Vidya Yerodikar ma'am, Pro-Chancellor of Symbiosis International University, to kindly felicitate the guests. Mr. Sanjay Panda, Joint Secretary, IOR, Ministry of External Affairs. Ambassador Yogendra Kumar, former Indian Ambassador to Philippines.
Thank you, ma'am. We now request Dr. Rajni Gupte, Vice Chancellor of Symbiosis International University, to felicitate our guests.
Ambassador Anup Mutkal, former India High Commissioner to Mauritius.
Mr. Shomo Mr. Shomo Acharya, Founder and Chairman, eTrans Private Solutions Limited.
Thank you, ma'am. Dr. Vidya Yerodikar is the Pro-Chancellor of Symbiosis International University. She is also the Principal Director of Symbiosis Society, which encompasses the Symbiosis schools and institutions under the SIU umbrella. Dr. Vidya holds a postgraduate degree in medicine, a degree in law, and a PhD in internationalization of higher education in India. She is a member of many esteemed corporate and government bodies and was appointed as an independent director on the board of RITES Limited under Ministry of Railways, Government of India. We would now request ma'am to give the welcome address.
A very good morning to all the esteemed members on the dais. my dear students, faculty members, non-teaching staff, and persons from the media. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome all the dignitaries on the dais. Mr. Sanjay Pandaji, who's come earlier at our campus, the university campus in December of 2016, to address a gathering of students like these. I think some of you would be present even then, on again a topic which is quite similar to what we are going to discuss today. The topic was India and the Indian Ocean. Along with him, of course, Ambassador Yogendra Kumarji was also there. But the two new guests who have come to Symbiosis, I guess for the first time, Ambassador Mudgal and Mr. Acharya, I once again welcome all of you. All of you to this institution, SIIB. The Vice Chancellor, Dr. Rajni Gupte, who is, I can say, a product of this institution, who's actually built this institution to what it is today, and Asmita, who's the director of SIIB. We've discussed this topic at length as a part of our discussions in the last International Relations Conference, which was titled India and the Indian Ocean, Sustainability, Security and Development. And Blue Economy was one of the sessions that we spoke about. When Dr. Asmita came to me to discuss the theme for this year's leadership series, without any hesitation, I said, you must discuss Blue Economy. Because I'm sure all of you have done more than enough research and you have experts, and I'm not going to talk anything about the subject, but because of what India is today, the presence of India in the Indian Ocean and India emerging as a global power in this region. And of course, the geopolitical and socio-political changes that are happening. But for Symbiosis, this region holds, it's very dear to us. You all saw in the film that my father, Dr. Muzumdar sir, established Symbiosis because of a student from Mauritius. Ambassador Mudgal, you will be happy to know because you've spent many years in Mauritius. So the beginning and the establishment of Symbiosis begins with a problem that a student from Mauritius faced in the city of Pune. Over the years, we've been having a large number of students from this region. We've been helping most of those countries in capacity building a great human resource, and students are doing extremely well back home. In fact, some of them, and especially in Mauritius, sir, some of our students have even become ministers. One of them is, I don't know whether you know him, Mr. Mahen Uchana, who was present at the last conference. He was a minister in the past in the government. So we are proud to say that we have been of some help to this region, and we also hold this region very dear to us. Last conference, we had Ambassador Bhagirath, who is the chairman of the IORA, and he's based in Mauritius. And he and Ambassador Prakash Shah, who's also associated with Symbiosis, came up with an idea whether we could establish an IORA university and whether Symbiosis can assist. We are in talks with Ambassador Bhagirath. I don't know how it's going to shape up. Of course, the Ministry of External Affairs has to bless us and take this forward. And I think we've written to Sanjay Pandaji's office as well, and even to the minister. But I personally feel that Symbiosis is in a position which can help establishment of a university called IORA University. It is going to benefit a large number of students and young population coming from this region. Apart from this institution called SIIB, we also have another institution which is called Symbiosis Institute of International Studies, and you will be glad to know that one student who we gave full scholarship, a student from Mauritius, a girl who is studying MA in International Relations, is presently doing her internship at the IORA office in Mauritius. So with these few words, I would not like to take much time because I know the presentations are wonderful and I would also like to listen to them. I welcome all of you once again. I hope this is a beginning of a discussion that we can take forward. Sanjay ji, one request to you. We would like some of our students, both from SIIB and SSIS, to work as interns, in offices like yours and, offices that are in public position to help our students to understand things better. Thank you and welcome once again.
Thank you, ma'am. Dr. Rajni Gupte is the Vice Chancellor of Symbiosis International University. A distinguished academic, she received her doctorate degree in economics from the prestigious Gokhale Institute of Economics and Politics, Pune. She has taught at many foreign universities as well, including the Oakland University, Michigan, US, and Bremen University of Applied Sciences, Germany. She has been part of a leadership team at Symbiosis for over 2 decades. She is an independent director on the boards of several subsidiaries of L&T Finance Limited. Ma'am has won many awards for her outstanding contribution to education and is one of the 10 women selected from across Asia who have attended the Women in University Administration program, sponsored by the US Department of State. Ma'am, we request you to introduce Leadership Series 2017.
Good morning. Our chief guest this morning, Sanjay Panda, the Joint Secretary, IOR, Ministry of External Affairs. Our other distinguished speakers today, Ambassador Yogendra Kumar, the former Indian ambassador to Philippines, Ambassador Anup Mudgal, the former Indian ambassador to Mauritius, Mr. Shomu Acharya, the founder and chairman of eTrans Solutions Private Limited, Dr. Vidya Yeravdekar, the Pro-Chancellor of Symbiosis International University, Dr. Asmita Chitnis, the Director of SIIB, faculty members, other dignitaries present in the audience, and my dear students. I've been asked to introduce the series, and I think I can't refrain but talk about the genesis of how the SIIB Leadership Series was started. I think very many of you in the audience would not know that, so let me spend a few minutes talking about that. The SIIB Leadership Series was started way back in 1998. It was started as the R.D. Aga Leadership Series in the memory of late R.D. Aga, who was the chairman of our advisory committee, the SIIB advisory committee at that point of time. And in his memory, we started this series. Right from the beginning, the initiative was really to introduce young students of SIIB to themes and topics which are relevant, which are actually part of their curriculum, yet give them an insight which is outside the classroom. So leaders from across the corporate world, leaders from the world of diplomacy, many leaders across the world, I should say, came and addressed students right from 1998. The R.D. Aga Leadership Series got transformed into the SIIB Leadership Series in the year 2002, when we renamed it and made it the SIIB Leadership Series, because we wanted the name SIIB to figure in that. By that time, a large number of others had started Leadership Series too. So given this background, the endeavor has always been to make sure that young students at this institution, as it is at all institutes of Symbiosis, are exposed to a large number of speakers from across different domains who come and share their insights and add to the knowledge that the students have. I think the topic today is extremely interesting, as Dr. Vidya mentioned. This is something that we have already partly discussed at the IR conference which was held last year. However, the large number of students present here from international business, from energy and environment and agribusiness would certainly find it of great interest to pursue this further. I'm sure all of you are aware that trade has flourished for ages. Trade on land has flourished for ages. And in fact, I was just reading yesterday about an article which was talking about how the Iranian and the Indian religious texts, the Rig Veda and the Iranian religious text, have similar rituals. So the contact between people across land has always been there. But I'm sure you'll agree with me when I say that oceans are fascinating. Vast oceans have always held a great deal of fascination for people to find out what lies at the other end. So while people have looked at transversing oceans to reach out to the people and the resources at the other end for trade, oceans themselves are a wealth by themselves. Oceans have also been very important as providing access to a conduit to connect people. So when you look at the ocean today, I think your film very nicely talked about marine biotechnology, marine construction, a host of areas open up, marine renewable energy. All these areas are things that you will find will flourish in the future. But I think while we do that, we need to be very conscious of the fact that these are resources that should be conserved. Sustainability is extremely important. And I think one of the major concerns will be, I'm sure we all realize that the oceans are the #1 carbon dioxide sink and the replenisher of oxygen in the world. And that is its natural role. So we should not interfere with that. And I'm sure sustainability will be at the core of whatever we do in this region. In addition to the geopolitical implications of trade in this region, I think sustainability is something that all of you should keep in mind going ahead. And I'm sure the esteemed speakers will lay a great deal of emphasis on the various aspects of the blue economy today. I wish the conference every success. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. We now request all our dignitaries to kindly take their seat in the audience. All questions will be taken by the end of the session. Our chief guest for today, Mr. Sanjay Panda sir, is an Indian diplomat and a member of the Indian Foreign Service. He was till recently the Indian High Commissioner to Seychelles and has now taken over as Joint Secretary, Indian Ocean Region in the Ministry of External Affairs. Sir joined the IFS in 1991. He has served in the Indian missions in Brussels, Amman, Paris, and Kuala Lumpur. He was the Deputy Chief of Mission in Tokyo from 2010 to 2014, before moving to Seychelles on his assignment as the head of mission. His last assignment at headquarters was as Joint Secretary, East Asia at Ministry of External Affairs in New Delhi. He has also served as Under Secretary for Nepal at the Foreign Ministry during 1998-2000 and as Director China during 2008-2009. Sir, it is an honor to have you here with us today. We would like to invite you on stage and address the audience.
Good morning. Pro-Chancellor, Dr. Vidya Eravdekar, Dr. Rajni Gupta, Vice-Chancellor, my senior colleagues, Ambassador Yogendra Kumar and Ambassador Mudgal, Mr. Acharya, faculty members, and more importantly, all the young minds present here. In fact, I was wondering whether all the effort of making this presentation and all that we are going to talk about today really merits it, because I was so impressed with the film that the students have put together, and our young anchors, they have spelt out everything that we needed to say. In fact, very succinctly, this is what we are talking about. Friends, just wanted to mention that life for us has really come a full circle. About a millennium ago, about 1,000 years ago, India had been a maritime country. We had this maritime tradition. The part of India that I come from, the state of Orissa, we still celebrate what is called the Bali Yatra. You know, the traders who went to Indonesia, Bali, and that continues to be celebrated now. And then in the medieval ages, it was the maritime power that actually got the countries. I mean, you know, the major colonizers were the major maritime powers. 21st century, as we are here now, very rightly mentioned that it is the century of the seas. We have to recognize the fact that more than 70% of the Earth's surface is actually covered by water. And that effectively makes us living in what we term as a blue planet, where water sustains life. Having said that, we also have to recognize that the future of humanity is very closely intertwined with the future of our oceans. The oceans are a little different. They go beyond our national identities. They recognize no artificial barriers like we have in the land. They actually don't separate us as nations. But if you look at it, they are actually a bridge that links, a bridge that connects. So we have our neighbors, and we have our extended neighborhood who are our maritime neighbors. And in that sense, India and Australia are neighbors, our maritime neighbors. But we do face a challenge. The oceans have been all along considered as an inexhaustible resource. We look at it as a bottomless, infinite sink. You can put anything in there and it goes, it doesn't show up. This progressive degradation of ocean health, which has happened particularly in the last couple of decades, is thanks to many factors. Overexploitation of marine resources, particularly overfishing, which was mentioned, dumping of untreated land pollutants, oil spills, and with so many ships moving around, there's this ballast waters, and of course, the adverse impact of climate change, the ocean acidification, ocean warming, the loss of marine biodiversity. With our land space getting scarce, it is the humanity is the man who is increasingly looking at the sea for resources. And now, as we strive to restore our ocean health through sustained environmental management, the blue economy concept is now very much in vogue. Friends, especially the young minds present here, I would like to mention that it is all about management. You have to manage these resources, whichever field you go, be it finance, be it marketing, you may end up as investment bankers, you may end up in the civil services, public policy, it's all about management. And blue economy is a term which is still in the realm of understanding. There is still a little lack of clarity, but I can tell you it's all about management. With this basic premise, I would like to make a quick presentation. In fact, I may have got a little carried away while making this presentation, but I realize you don't need it because you know everything. So, but still, I'll quickly run through because since some efforts have been made, so might as well. Friends, this is what how I propose to make the, this is how I propose to discuss today. Blue economy, what is the concept and what is the salience that it has gained now? And what is the significance, the geostrategic significance of Indian Ocean region? I believe I was really very happy to hear that you did discuss about the Malacca dilemma, and I'm sure Ambassador Yogendra Kumar will be talking about it much more when he talks about the geostrategic part. But it's very important a very important aspect when we try to understand blue economy. And then we come to, there's something which I have to discuss because I'm paid for doing that. It is the blue economy from an Indian perspective. And what is the Indian approach? So I have to indulge in a little bit of marketing as well, so that you understand that we are not sleeping and doing a little bit of work. And then what is the vision for the future? Well, friends, blue economy, people have tried to coin up, explain, but it is all about sustainable development of ocean resources. It covers a wide range of economic activities associated with ocean, and it is talking about equity, inclusion, innovation, modern technology. But as distinct from ocean economy talks about the economic activities related to ocean, but at the same time, the subtle difference is sustainable development and balanced growth. This is what differentiates ocean economy from blue economy. So the two key aspects are sustainable development of ocean resources and optimum utilization of our oceanic space. Now, there are two parallel strands of blue economy for your understanding. One is a socio-economic model, which is an integral element of the SDG, the Sustainable Development Goals, which actually we have set these goals for ourselves to be attained by 2030, endorsed by the United Nations. And this is called the 14th SDG. And now the United Nations has taken this very, very seriously. And every year you have the Ocean Conference, UN Ocean Conference. And I had the opportunity to attend the UN Ocean Conference in New York this June, and I was amazed to see the amount of concern, amount of work which is now getting done on the SDGs and on Indian Ocean and on blue economy. So this socio-economic model is very important. And the second parallel is the business model, which encompasses innovative and dynamic business models, which is international, which goes beyond the national barriers. But before we proceed further, it's interesting to note, how did this term come about? It was in 2004, an American author, Gunter Pauli, he basically tried to talk about it as a philosophy of zero waste. What I don't have a use, you might have a use. So that whatever I discard, what is my waste, could be something which could give some value for you. So with this zero waste principle, he started what is called the blue economy. But then it was more as a business model, because he was talking about how to match the localized system of production and consumption, and then adopting innovation, business models, and stuff like that. But the first book that came out on blue economy by Gunter Pauli was published 6 years later in April 2010. And he made a case for, okay, let's have 100 innovations which will create 100 million jobs. And then still there was lack of clarity. How? And then he brought about his version 2.0 in, I think it was in 2015 or 2016, I think 2015, when he upgraded the target to 200 projects, $4 billion investment, and 3 million jobs. Okay, we set ourselves target, but it was not clarified. But let me tell you that when this thing came about, there was somebody in a tiny country called Seychelles, the former president of Seychelles, James Michel. As a small island developing states, he saw a major opportunity. He picked up this concept and tried to adapt it in his country, in a small island nation of less than 100,000 population and 115 islands. He wanted to adapt it in every sphere of activity, not only economic, mind you. Blue economy was, factored into every activity of governance and also those of the private sector, and which was very quietly done. But then his concept, as we are talking about today, was very, very much there. For example, any project, anything happens, there had to be a point about they have to justify how is it blue economy sustainable from the blue economy angle. So which is something which was very innovative, I thought, and since I was posted in Seychelles in 2014, I was very impressed by the work that they had done. The blue economy, as you all know, so I'll actually quickly go through these slides now. it contributes to several aspects. I mean, food security, poverty alleviation, connectivity, creating of jobs, socio-economic growth. So it is basically all-encompassing. And these are the various the various sectors that the blue economy covers. So I'm not elaborating this now, but just wanted to mention that it is much more than economics, not much more than the social activity. It also encompasses tourism. There's renewable energy, hydrocarbons, developing ports. The only underlying, only salient feature which you have to talk about, which you have to understand, is sustainability, sustainable development and balanced growth, which has to translate in all these activities. Now, I want to talk about the geostrategic significance. These details will be delved in detail by Ambassador Yogendra Kumar when he talks about the strategic aspects, but I would like to just emphasize the significance of blue economy in Indian Ocean. You see, India has always been a maritime nation. As you can see, the location of India, the peninsular landmass jots into the ocean, which is about 2,000 kilometers into the sea, and we have been at the fulcrum of all the trade activities. This was over 1,000 years ago, and you can see that this old trade routes, there's a very old sailors trading map. Sorry, a part of it is going out. Anyway, it shows that India has been in the center. Now, looking at India, if you see that over 7,500 kilometer coastline, and you see the blue mark which goes, that's 7,500 kilometer coastline, and we have 1,382 islands. So how critical it is for us the oceans are, and why we should be looking at blue economy seriously, you can guess from this. What is more important is the exclusive economic zone. 2.3 million square kilometers of exclusive economic zone, which is 200 nautical miles, where we could have the full sovereign rights of exploiting resources, fishing, and this equals 2/3 of the total Indian landmass. Now, major international shipping lanes and the traffic flow, you can notice, is depicted by these lines, by these shipping lanes, and more than 100,000 ships transit the Indian Ocean region every year. That gives you the significance of the Indian Ocean. And sorry, the percentages are missing in the projection, but it carries 66% of world's total oil, 50% of world's container shipments, and 33% of world's bulk cargo, as the host mentioned also. Now, very interesting are, yesterday you discussed, I had a presentation on the Malacca dilemma, and this is what I am coming to. This is landlocked to the north, Indian Ocean. So, any movement here has to be through the choke points. You can see Suez doesn't show in the maps, Suez, Hormuz, Bab el-Mandeb, and you have the Malacca, Sunda, and Lombok. These are the major choke points. And any blockade of this choke point can really lead to a global economic crisis. So this is what is very important. So that is why the significance of Indian Ocean can be gauged, the geostrategic significance can be gauged from this. And this explains, this shows the density the density and the growing traffic density in the Indian Ocean region. And with these choke points, now we understand what these extra-regional powers are doing in the Indian Ocean. There are about 120 ships of extra-regional powers who are present in the Indian Ocean. And that is because they have their economic interests, they have strategic interests, and this is something which you'll be listening to later. But India's economic development is really closely linked with the Indian Ocean, and hence our focus is on blue economy. 90% of India's trade by volume and 70% by value is actually transacted by sea. And that gives you a sense why it is important for us to focus in developing sustainably our ocean resources and focusing on blue economy. And as you see, India is the 4th highest global energy consumer, and as we move in the path of development and as we move in the path of growth, our energy demand is still growing to rise. And here I am not mentioning that more than 80% of China's energy needs also move through the Indian Ocean. Now, this is a very interesting slide. You see every dot here that you see represents 100,000 population, which means that almost 1/3 of the global population reside in the Indian Ocean littorals, in the Indian Ocean islands and littorals, 1/3 of the global population. That is why the ocean, the only ocean in the world which is named after a country, Indian Ocean, is really linked with India in a very, very close and symbiotic manner. Now, from the Indian perspective, what are we looking at, how do we look at blue economy, and what are the principles? The principle, as I mentioned, would be responsible utilization of resources rather than indiscriminate exploitation. This is the basic premise on which we move. At the same time, we are also looking at the ocean to generate employment and ensure sustainability in the business and economic models. These are, I mentioned about the 2 strands, so it's very, very closely linked. Then it is an all-encompassing concept, as I told you, and we also recognize that. So blue economy has its salience in trade and investment promotion, infrastructure development, and also for sustainable tourism. And we are talking about culture, the cultural footprint which India has had over the years, I mean through the cultural contact, through the trade ties, are something which also have to translate now into various tourism projects, which again have to be developed in a sustainable manner. Marine science and technology, shipping, port development, sustainable fisheries, protection of marine biodiversity, the marine environment, so on and so forth. And that is why it is very important that we secure our oceanic space. And how do we secure our oceanic space? By ensuring that maritime safety and security is by ensuring maritime safety and security of Indian Ocean is there, so that we can all prosper. India has progressively acquired the role of a net security provider in the Indian Ocean region. We have been engaging in EZ surveillance of various small island nations, our neighbors and beyond our neighborhood. And also we have been closely associated with defense and security of various island nations. We'll come to that later. But what India also recognizes that it's very important to develop blue economy in a regional cooperative framework. That is how the Indian Ocean Rim Association and our membership and the way we look at it is something which is important. It's a 21 member grouping and India plays a leadership role there. And blue economy is actually now accepted as a, along with the 6 priority areas, this is now recognized and accepted as a cross-cutting theme on which we are working and focusing. So far as India is concerned, we are also aspiring to have a leadership role in the Indian Ocean region, and we have an extensive outreach to the small island developing states and LDCs, the littoral LDCs. We know that they have a very unique challenge. The challenge that they face in the challenge that the SIDS and the LDCs face and their vulnerability has to be handled differently, and we have taken it on ourselves to ensure that the SIDS and the LDCs their capacity building and their development assistance, development partnership, India plays a very important role in that. And given the special circumstances that the SIDS and LDCs are, blue economy is actually a very important mantra for their development. In fact, how India is politically and economically engaging them, Ambassador Mudgal will be discussing that in his presentation. Promoting blue economy. This is a very important vision that our Prime Minister had, the vision of Sagar, security and growth for all in the region. In fact, this was espoused when Prime Minister made his Sagar Yatra, or his 4-country, which eventually turned out to a 3-country Indian Ocean tour. In fact, when he visited Mauritius and there, while presenting a naval ship, in fact, our Ambassador Mudgal was then the High Commissioner there. So it is in his presence that Prime Minister announced this concept of Sagar, which is actually the driving force of blue economy, of our engagement in the Indian Ocean and also for the blue economy. So I mentioned about how blue economy has been accepted as a cross-cutting issue alongside the 6 priority areas in IORA. And at the same time, I also mentioned that as part of our international cooperation, especially with SIDS and LDCs, we are involved in technology transfer, capacity building, sharing of assets, and also this is something which we continue to do, and there's a huge allocation of our budget that has been made in this area. Maritime security initiatives which India is taking as part of its promotion of blue economy, and I mentioned about the EZ surveillance. We also continue to have joint exercises, and then humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, search and rescue operations, hydrographic assistance. In fact, coming to the humanitarian and disaster relief, recently, for example, the floods in Sri Lanka, India was the first country to respond within hours of the disaster happening. Same thing in Maldives when there was a water crisis, one major water plant, the only water plant going out of commission. In fact, water was flown into Maldives on at a very short notice. In fact, also white shipping agreement and developing maritime domain awareness and protection of our sea lines of communication. One of the important project which is very close to our Prime Minister's heart and which where we are pumping in a lot of resources is the project Sagarmala. It's a port-led development initiative which I'll show you in a different slide. And the other thing is the development of the small-scale artisanal fishers. You know, the small-scale artisanal fishers globally comprise 90% of all the fishermen community, but their catch is only 30% of the total catch. So this is something which we have to, when we talk about sustainability, we have to do away with the practices of bottom trawling, of pair trawling, I mean, which really scoops up the bottom of the ocean, and this is something, I mean, we have some major ongoing issue now vis-a-vis Sri Lanka, but we are in the back foot in that, because we have to stop this practice of bottom trawling. Of course, the small additional fishes have to be also provided market access, so they require hand holding. Financing the blue economy also is a major question, so there has to be a center and state cooperation model. You cannot let only the center do it, so this is something also which has to be worked out. And one of our apex chambers has put up a special task force on blue economy, which actually Ambassador Mudgal may be a part of it, if I am not mistaken. I mentioned about the economic dependency on the Indian Ocean region and how important fisheries is. India is the second largest producer of fish. I mentioned about our support that we need to give. And this is the project Sagarmala that I was mentioning about, which talks about 200 major and minor ports that is conceptualized. In fact, the total project, which initially started as at a little smaller scale, has gone up, and along with the private sector investment which is expected, the total projected investment is about 1.2 trillion over the next 10 years. And this is also linking access to the hinterland, improve port connectivity, provide the last mile connectivity, and this will also increase employment opportunities and also enhance the maritime ecosystem and also develop the coastal economy. So it is something which is important for us, as it will integrate into the Sagar vision eventually. So what is India's vision for the future? What are we really looking at? Sagar I mentioned about, and then there is another term which has been domestically coined by Prime Minister, Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, which means together we shall prosper. So that also translates regionally when we talk about the Indian Ocean and promoting blue economy. But the four key enablers of blue economy are the governance, technology, management, and entrepreneurship. And this requires collective action, and regionally, India cannot do it alone, and it is in our interest to engage our neighbors, extended neighbors, and our partners in the Indian Ocean. So while we are deepening both economic and security cooperation, we also have to ensure that our oceanic space is also safeguarded for us to develop blue economy. We have to also promote cooperation in low carbon shipping, regional fisheries agreement, ocean surveillance, information sharing. But let me tell you that there are several challenges that you will face while implementing blue economy. For example, the lack of technology and the need for high capital investment. And that is why even this mining and extraction of resources are also high risk activities which endanger the ecology. And that is the reason why that this lot of a PPP model, a public-private partnership model is which I feel is very important to ensure the success of blue economy. And what we have to also, what we are concerned about, and that is what we should do in the future, is also the blue economy principles have to be integrated into the decision-making process in the government and also in the private sector. So the potential is there, but it is also important, the private sector has to play a very important role. Any policy that the private sector has to take, any business model, it has to look at sustainable development and accelerated growth have to be matched, and there has to be a balance. So I mentioned about the PPP model, which could be seen as a force multiplier, and it is important to have both horizontal and vertical integration of all blue economy related planning and policymakers across government and also in the business chambers. I can see that on blue economy there is still some confusion about how to go about. But the ball was set rolling in 2016 when India organized the first Maritime India Summit in April 2016. It actually showcased India's intent to build coastal economic zones, coastal smart cities, multimodal and inland transportation, coastal shipping and island development. Another important aspect which was also flagged pertained to skill development and blue economy related issues. So friends, it is actually, we have to understand that when Indian Ocean region is emerging as a new frontier in the global strategic calculus, blue economy is something which is very important for our future prosperity and which has to be seen as collective action which will lead us there. And before ending, I would just like to show this. It's a very profound statement. The blue chakra in our flag represents the potential of blue economy. If you see the wheel, I mean, it rolls the prosperity, and if you see that it is open to several aspects, it covers almost everything. So with the wheel of progress, we have to actually take this as an inspiration and move forward. With these words, I think I exceeded my time, but thank you for your attention, and my apologies for it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for shedding light on the critical importance of blue economy and sharing an Indian perspective on the same. The next speaker for the day is Mr. Shaumo Acharya, the founder and chairman of E-Trans Solutions Private Limited. He is widely regarded as one of the most active leaders in the field of transportation infrastructure and logistics. Mr. Shaumo has a formidable reserve of experience in the retail sales of petroleum products, advertising, public relations, and freight forwarding. He started his career in Indo-Burma Petroleum. In 1989, he moved to the UK, where he was responsible for setting up Balmer Lorry UK. Today, he is an acknowledged telematics pioneer with an in-depth knowledge and expertise in the field of surface transport, containerized cargo movement, and logistics support and related systems and services. Sir, thank you for joining us here today. We would now request you to address the audience.
Good afternoon. It's very difficult to speak after Mr. Panda. Very tough task. Anyway, Pro-Chancellor, Dr. Vidya, Vice Chancellor Rajni ji, Ashmita ji, Ambassador Mudgal, Ambassador Kumar, and Mr. Panda, and the young brains and minds before me. It's a pleasure to come here and share a little understanding of the blue economy after Mr. Panda. See, if I take you a little backwards, he did start it. 1,000 years back, the global economy was primarily a riverine and coastal economy. And that's how the Indian traders used to go to Indonesia. They generally used to move on the coastline, and they used to go from Indonesia to Arab. India used to export cotton. They used to bring in nutmeg and spices from Indonesia and different merchandise from the Arab. And this is where we were one of the most active participants in that area. Today the world is changing. There's a lot of challenge before you guys in the coming decade. The big guys on the West are suddenly, who have been promoters of globalization, are suddenly getting back to protectionism. And my own feeling is this is going to grow and grow. It's not going to, today suddenly you find a communist, so-called communist country called China become the flag bearer of global business. Now, these changes are coming, and here I think the government and the circumstances have really placed the right focus on the IORA, Indian Ocean Rim economy, because that's an area we go back there. So far we've all been in business, we've been all West focused. All our thinking has been West focused. Time has come that we start looking at this area where, as he said, about 1/3 of the world population reside, and there is a huge resource which is lying under the ocean to exploit, very rightly, sustainably exploited. So, with this, which is the one? Okay. Many of the slides are repetition. He's already made it. But the focus of Gunther was primarily 10 years, 100 innovation, 100 million jobs. The entire focus has been creating jobs, innovations, and spreading wealth with sustainability. As ma'am was saying, Mr. Panda was saying, the center of everything is sustainable development. That is the center. Because today, over the last centuries, we have overexploited the earth. We do find the danger of that visible. There are changes which is coming up. So it's all the more important that sustainability focus is maintained while we are looking at ocean. And very frankly, ocean is going to be the target for the next 20, 25, 30 years, because all the monies are going to finally pour in there. It's all been covered by Mr. Panda. I'm moving on. The estimated commercial value of ocean is between $3 trillion to $6 trillion, and the asset value is $24 trillion, which it's quite substantial. And as it is, what has already been mentioned, a few additions there. Global telecommunication, if you see, submarine cables carry 95% of digital data. Oil and gas, 30% produce offshore. Marine tourism, shore-based commercial activity. Many of these areas, there's a huge potential, but nothing really is happening in our part of the world. The focus today in India has to become job creation. And job creation is one area. Job creation means not on the high-end job creation, but the low and middle-end job creation. And where ocean economy, blue ocean, blue economy can help us a great deal. Getting back to what I was telling, the old riverine economy and the coastal economy. The recent focus of the Sagarmala project is not only port and coast, but working on the riverine, connecting the rivers all through. And here I have specifically mentioned on China. China's focus on blue economy is one. China has been focusing on their riverine movement for the last 25 years. 30% of domestic cargo in China moves on river, whereas in India, nothing practically moves on river. And riverine movement, really, you don't need to spend much money on infrastructure, excepting the jetties and some equipment handlers. That's about it. Of course, lighter edges also. We were talking about he was talking about this 200 kilometers. There are certain specific UN agreed parameters on which the right of every nation on their sea is very clearly demarcated. You have a 12 nautical miles, there is territorial water, a further 12 kilometers is contiguous zone, 200 nautical mile is your exclusive economic zone. That's where really you start investing your money to get the best result. So when we are looking at, these are the countries on the Indian Ocean Rim which we are focusing. And every country today has started with specific projects in regard to blue economy. If you see from Bangladesh to Myanmar to Seychelles, Sri Lanka, Maldives, Mauritius, they have earmarked specific projects in this area. And same is Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, Africa, Kenya, Tanzania, Mozambique, and South Africa. In all these areas of different activities, what is required of the industry today is creating the best industry processes and also sharing of entire data, whereby we can create models of win-win-win, where if we Indian business can get into these areas, invest ourselves, take our better technology wherever it is there, bring theirs what is available from them, and create a synergistic solution for the future of business. This, of course, has already been discussed by Mr. Panda. See, I just wanted to highlight two areas of ocean which is extremely critical and extremely valuable. Pharmaceutical is one industry which is going to be hugely benefited provided investment is done on ocean. If you find here antibiotic, cancer research, inflammation, asthma, molecular probe, virals, you have different sources which are available below the sea surface. We really need to take those out and then do the research and development to create new products. This is one area where businesses are going to focus in future. The second is in deep sea mining. There are different minerals and identified production capacity which is there, where there are going to be focus from the industry tomorrow. I wanted to identify this so that we look at a whole lot of things we are not aware of, because work has not yet been done, rather work has not yet been started. But there is a huge wealth lying underwater in the oceans, which needs to be exploited sustainably by the industry. This we've already discussed on the port initiative. This is another major contribution which is going to come from ocean is in terms of energy. Energy, whether it is wind energy, solar, wave, tidal, ocean thermal energy, and osmotic power. In all these areas, there is a huge possibility from the ocean. There are challenges. Part of it has been discussed by Mr. Panda. The regulatory challenge, demand for large investments in deep sea mining. My own gut feel is initial investments probably has to be done by the government and get the private sector, because private sector will have a lot of resistance to give the kind of investment which is required. They won't invest unless they see a possible results coming up. So there has to be certain initial initiative by the government, the way Government of India took initiative on making the highway, from the old highways to the new 4-lane highways. The initiative finally had to be taken by the Government of India by creating a bankable project. A similar initiative need to be taken by the government, but there will be immediately thereafter private sector would come in. These are the different opportunities which is being placed one by one, which are there and which are for the take of the private sector industry. Whether it's fisheries, that's a big area. One more area which we really talked about in FICCI was the tourism area, because this tourism, ocean tourism, is a very, very successful in the West. It has started in Singapore, but it's not really started in the Indian Ocean Rim. So there needs to be infrastructure created, and that doesn't require much of it, and creates huge amount of job at lower levels. On the macro approach, the FICCI recommendations have been that we give high priority to ecological protection, optimize business potential, higher attention to security and development. Desired strategy is adoption of holistic strategy to accelerate growth, good collaboration, coordination between public and private investments, large-scale investment from the government and private sector. India has a huge opportunity to be a leader on IORA, because there are no competing, much bigger power available in this particular area. The requirement of legislation and administrative measures, research and information system, interlineage between national and international dimensions. In the trade and investment area, MSMEs are going to have a very critical role to play in this area, especially in regard to integration with the different other economies. There, one of the suggestions which has been given and work has started on creating an online business portal where all the businesses of each country get registered, so that you can really access each other's strength and start doing business together. This is one which will eventually become a knowledge network of stakeholders. As you can see, the potential is huge. We need to give a proper focus in this area. The governments are working. They are trying to create all the different formulations which are required to be done. And the future, there is a huge future in this particular area, where I'm sure you guys, when you graduate yourself, would start working on and take the country forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your insightful thoughts on the development of blue economy and its implications on various industries, including pharmaceuticals, ocean tourism, and deep sea mining. The next speaker for the day is Mr. Yogendra Kumar, retired from the Indian Foreign Service in 2012 in the rank of Secretary of the Government to India. At the time of his retirement, he was Indian Ambassador to the Philippines, with concurrent accreditation to the Pacific Island countries of Palau, Micronesia, and the Marshall Islands. He has earlier been High Commissioner to Namibia and Ambassador to Tajikistan, during which period he also handled Afghanistan affairs. He has served on the faculty of the National Defense College and in the Ministry of External Affairs. He has handled multilateral organizations and dialogues such as G8-G5 Dialogue, EAS, IBSA, IORA, etc. Since retirement, he has been writing and speaking on foreign policy and security affairs. His book, Diplomatic Dimension of Maritime Challenges for India in the 21st Century, was released in 2015. Thank you for being here with us today, sir. I would request you to come on stage and address the audience.
I can just keep it. It's okay. Good afternoon. Dr. Rajni Gupte, Vice Chancellor, SIU, esteemed members of the faculty, dear students, my fellow guest speakers. First of all, I should say that I'm going to speak on India's security challenges in the Indian Ocean region, prospects for economic and political cooperation. So I feel honored to be a keynote speaker at the SIIB Leadership Series and to speak to some of our brightest young minds as they embark on the journey in the corporate world. Over the years, as was made clear to us, and I was here last year as well, the Symbiosis Institute of International Business has established a name for itself as a front-ranking management institution at home and abroad. And as the young people like yourself prepare for this journey, an important part of this preparation is greater sensitivity to international environment or the awareness of international risks in their corporate activity. Yesterday, when I was coming here from the airport, I had a good fortune to interact with one of you, Shivam Trivedi, who was talking about that he specialized in logistics chain. Now, logistics chain, obviously, as we all know in the globalized world, it's an international chain, both for supply and for distribution. And as the director of the International Institute of Strategic Studies, London, exhorted the corporate leaders that they have to develop the capacity for making country risk analyses, because for all the decisions that they make, they have to make an assessment as to the country from where they are either procuring or the country to which they are supplying, to what extent are these countries stable, what kind of risks the countries themselves present. And that really is actually a huge challenge for any corporate leader today. So it's a very good initiative to have to bring together experts and diplomats, especially serving like Ambassador Panda, to get a sense as to how the world looks like. Now, a discussion on the Indian Ocean region is both timely and important. This is because the Indian Ocean region offers for us a challenge as well as an opportunity. The Prime Minister Modi's Sagar speech, which we already have been referred to, provides a profound exposition of both these aspects from India as well as from the region's point of view. The Indian Ocean region has shaped our history through the millennia. India's interactive leadership with the region has been a civilizational catalyst for its people and the littoral communities in the Indian Ocean. The Indian cultural and intellectual renaissance in the 19th century invoked this glorious past of the country and bemoaned its decline culturally, intellectually, and technologically when the Indian Ocean reduced to a British lake with its headquarters of the Royal Navy being located in Singapore. Post-independence, the developments in the Indian Ocean were a matter of critical concern to the Indian leadership, which focused strongly on the country's naval and maritime capacity to be able to shape these developments. True to its history, the growth of India's influence in the region is concomitant with the growth of its capacity, which has profound implications for the geopolitics of the region as well as the world at large. With the end of the Cold War in 1991 and the onset of the current era of globalization, The salience of the Indian Ocean in geopolitics and geoeconomics has risen. The global commerce in the current era of globalization is seaborne, and the Indian Ocean is globally both transit waters as well as originating and terminating point for international shipping. Hence, it attracts a very high interest of navies of the world powers. And when the navies come in, they look into issues like the balance of power equation, which navy is strong and which navy is weak, and what it means for the situation. Domination of choke points. If you control the choke points like the Hormuz or the Malacca Straits or Bab el-Mandeb, you control and dominate the ocean. And the various ways in which the naval war fighting techniques are developing. The various oceanic islands, Mauritius, Seychelles, and so on and so forth, are seen by the navies as unsinkable aircraft carriers for power projection purposes. And for us, Andaman Nicobar Islands, Laccadive, Minicoy. So they give us a platform for projection of our power. There is a natural interest in the state of politics in the littoral countries for that reason, and also as to how we have to see when we look at the Indian Ocean, as to how they contribute the balance of power in Indian Ocean region itself. India's location and its peninsular configuration, which I mentioned just now, is such as to dominate, the way the peninsular configuration is. It gives us the capacity to project our power over the busy international shipping lanes. But conversely, it also means that external powers, whether they are friendly to India or adversarial to India, seek to manipulate India's power projection capabilities. That India has been mentioned, has a coastline 7,500 kilometers with more than 1,200 islands and an exclusive economic zone of 2 million square kilometers. When you add the approximately 1.2 million square kilometers of continental shelf for which India has applied, India's total seabed area is almost as equal to the landmass, something which doesn't sink in our consciousness even today. This area, apart from the wider global commons of the Indian Ocean, is the storehouse of immense oceanic wealth, which opens an entirely new vista for India's economic and technological growth, but also demands huge capacity for policing and surveillance. So what kind of challenges does the Indian Ocean region have? Well, you can define them broadly into two areas, traditional and non-traditional, from the security point of view, both of which require urgent responses, failing which the existing maritime order can be destabilized to India's detriment. Now, today, as we know, that the Indian Ocean Maritime Order we consider it favorable to us, unlike, let us say, unlike before the end of the Cold War. If you remember 1971, the USS Enterprise sailed the Bay of Bengal, and we thought it's going to disturb India's military operations in then East Pakistan. So whilst we were concerned, now we find that the Indian Ocean existing balance of power is largely in our favor. And any change in the balance of power will mean that our own growth prospects, our trajectory of India's growth can be affected adversely. Because of India's benign role, India has a benign image. Most countries don't feel threatened by India. And also because of the fact that we have convergent strategic interests with the US, with Japan, and the Western countries who want India to play a more active role in strengthening and shaping of the maritime order to ensure stability and prosperity in the region. So for India, it's a major opportunity even as we look as to how to address the security challenges. Now, the traditional security challenges, basically I'll describe, as I said, that we consider by and large the Indian Ocean to be largely less turbulent as compared to the adjacent seas like the South China Sea or on the other side the Mediterranean, for example. So whilst we consider, but there are these threats which may spill over into the Indian Ocean region. Now, what are they? The growing activities of navies is something which is of great interest to India because it has the potential to impact the existing balance of power. From India's point of view, these would be the Chinese and the Pakistani. The US-Iran tensions and the Saudi-Iranian tensions could also be destabilizing. And that is where you find some difference that we have with our major partners. This raises the issue of respective strategies that we have to develop to dominate choke points, Bab el-Mandab, Strait of Hormuz, the Malacca Straits. Then we have the issue which was raised earlier about the naval bases by extra-regional powers. How do you manage that? There are newer doctrines of naval warfighting, including asymmetrical warfighting, and also naval modernization, including even individual groups which develop the technology or which utilize the technology to empower themselves to challenge traditional navies. The example, of course, here is a morphing of this kind of a threat into what you call the jihadi terrorism. Mumbai was attacked from sea, and one incident which has not been very widely reported in India, but in October it happened. The Pakistan Navy ship Zulfikar, which was attempted, and they nearly succeeded. Attempt was made by Al-Qaeda to capture it, and then to run that ship against the US, but surely could be against India. And if you take into account the fact that the Pakistani Navy, as it's modernizing, they also are talking about putting their nuclear weapons on board the ship or the submarine. Now, if an incident like, for example, PNS Zulfikar, if Zulfikar had nuclear weapons, you would find the nuclear weapons falling into the hands of the terrorists. So there's the kind of threat you find. Then there are existing flashpoints, and these are located at the oceanic choke points near the Bab el-Mandab, as I mentioned, Horn of Africa, Gulf of Hormuz, all these areas, Malacca Straits, where you find that situation fragile. Somalia is a good example of that. Yemen is another one. All of the choke points. So anything happening in these areas, immediately there's an impact on that. Tension between US and Iran. So what you find is that in the Gulf of Hormuz, for example, Iran's declared strategy is that they will choke the Gulf of Hormuz in case they're threatened by US. So the other kind of implications of that. And of course, this kind of tension is growing as those who followed the United Nations General Assembly discussion recently, the exchange between President Trump and President Rouhani. Then, of course, the crisis in the Gulf Cooperation Council, where you have Qatar under blockade by the others. So, and all of these have a major impact on the maritime situation. Then of course, the other issues, the state fragility in the Indian Ocean region. Now, why did the states become fragile? Again, because superpower rivalry. During the Cold War, Ethiopia, Somalia, Djibouti, and all these places were the battlegrounds for the superpowers. They were the US and the Soviet Union. And they all have become fragile. Now, in the case of Somalia, Somali piracy arose because Somalia, the state, collapsed. And when the state collapsed, the Somali fishermen found that their fish were being literally stolen by the European trawlers. And they started attacking them. And once they started attacking them, they thought they developed the capacity to attack the commercial shipping. That's how the piracy began. It led to a huge international effort to sort of control that piracy, leading to insurance sort of premium going up, huge amount of naval deployments to escort these ships. So all these are the consequences when in the littoral region instability grows. It also has something else. So instability means that possibility of terrorism growing, transnational crime developing, and also the diminished state capacity to address these issues, which need to evacuation operations. For example, we had to evacuate our citizens from some of these places. So, as I mentioned, piracy is a function, is a direct outcome of state fragility. Then, of course, the other kind of threats you have were also mentioned about the non-traditional security challenges. And these are equally time-pressing. I mean, if you read the report of the UNFCCC, for example, they bring out the periodic reports, that the climate change actually is now entering into a phase of irreversibility. Now, and in our security doctrines, the impact of climate change on security, internal security, international security, is not yet fully internalized, even as far as India is concerned. And you find these figures in places where India is spending as much money on its defense as spending on climate change mitigation adaptation. So you can see the kind of threat that India is already facing. Now, climate change, the Prime Minister talked about it in his Sagar speech. What it means is that apart from the overall impact on the global situation, it means that vast littoral areas, Mumbai, the coastal, India's huge coastline, and not India, but even other littoral states, they are exposed to serious climate change risks. The large areas, heavy population and industrial centers, they are exposed to that. Now, if these exposure, for example, what are they? There could be frequency of extreme weather events. We've seen the example this time recently in the US, where people are saying that in living memory they haven't seen the intensity of such hurricanes. So even if a developed country like the US feels itself inadequately prepared for it, you can imagine the state of preparedness of poorer countries, how they will, and what its impact is. I mean, one example again from our South Asian recent history is Bangladesh. The birth of Bangladesh was fueled by the fact that during the cyclone season, when East Pakistan battered by the cyclone, the then population of East Pakistan actually felt that Pakistan government had abandoned them. They weren't able to provide the relief as required. So you find that the major, and because of the fact these are our concentrations are in the coastal areas, to prepare to climate-proof these areas requires is both in terms of huge technology, investment in infrastructure, and tremendous amount of preparation required at the community governance level to the national and international level. Now, people actually say, the climatologists actually say that the future of climate change in South Asia would be abrupt and non-linear. So you cannot say that when you find the temperature rising, so that is it will be proportionately, that's how the intensity will increase. At some stage, it will become disruptive. So you have the frequency, and then of course it leads to governance issues. It takes long time. Nepal is still not recovering from the earthquake. So you can imagine what an effort is required for rehabilitation, for rescue and rehabilitation of populations, restoring infrastructure so that their economic health and the community health is restored. These are major challenges. And then combined with all developing countries, urbanization, demographic imbalances. So they actually even complicate our governance challenges, even whilst we are trying to meet with them, the huge urban conurbations that we have, poor infrastructure. You have rainfall in Mumbai, and Mumbai is paralyzed. So just think about existing governance challenges. To that you add the challenges compounded by climate change. So all of this requires, as I said, tremendous, it's not just national level effort, international effort, it requires community level effort. So it's a major exercise, and we are still gearing up for it. Then of course, the other kind of non-traditional challenges, because of the turbulence on the high seas, a lot of these commercial shipping, they carry private armed guards. And we have this incident also involving the Italian Marines. And one of the former chiefs of naval staff actually described them as floating armories, that these armed guards move from ship to ship, and they are themselves can be a major major problem for us. So what are the prospects if we were to talk about economic and political cooperation? Now, so for us, the important thing is that we have to address both these issues. Now, as I said, at this particular point of time, the prospects are promising, given the desire of most IOR littorals, and the US, for India to take the lead in this, including thought leadership. And the Indian naval capabilities are certainly quite substantial. If you talk in today's terms, I would say that after the US, Indian Navy is the second most powerful navy in the Indian Ocean. Therefore, we are in a position to shape the maritime order to achieve the objectives the Prime Minister outlined in his Saga speech. And of course, one objective of stabilizing the maritime order actually is that it opens for us the prospect for development of the blue economy, which is what we all collected here to discuss. So, therefore, therefore it requires that kind of perspective. Now, as I mentioned to you, that the sense of available opportunity for India needs to be tempered by the fact that the tensions of adjoining waters are spilling over the Indian Ocean. So that is where you find that the window of opportunity that we have may not exist for too long, whether the tensions of the adjoining waters spilling over the Indian Ocean or the looming sort of possibility of political, that's one, deepening economic and security cooperation in littoral, including maritime security capacities. Second, collective action and cooperation to advance peace and security is another one. A more integrated and cooperative future for sustainable development for all, including blue economy. And primary responsibility, that's the key point when we talk about as to what should be the objective of developing our political and economic cooperation. And the Prime Minister emphasized that the primary responsibility for peace, stability and prosperity is that of the littorals, to be achieved in a climate of trust and transparency, respect for maritime rules and norms, sensitivities to each other's interests, peaceful resolution of maritime issues, and increase in maritime cooperation. In other words, this is the prospect. What kind of things we need to do in that? One, of course, is that we need to build the ground rules for political and security cooperation. And because we have the space and the time, if we build the ground rules, it is quite likely that we create the sinews of action at various levels for greater economic cooperation and tap the resources of the blue economy. Now, the realization of this prospect has to be pursued on two tracks, which are referred to by the previous speakers. In this, of course, the diplomacy has to be at the center, leverage to create defenses against the destabilizing threats to the maritime order, because, as I said, this time the situation is favorable to us. On the bilateral track, again, Ambassador Panda talked about that. India's cooperation with littoral has to be across the entire spectrum of challenges and the opportunities. Its domain awareness, preparedness, and presence at the time when your help and assistance is required, networked operations, maritime assistance and support, coordinated patrols, and other forms of cooperation, security of exclusive economic zone, humanitarian and disaster relief responses, and to maintain overall the good order at sea. So the diplomatic engagement across a wide spectrum of these efforts is required: development, cooperation, infrastructure development projects, capacity enhancement against climate change. If all the countries you take into account, they need to build their capacity to meet these challenges, and India is in a position to lend a hand. So that actually is very important. The Ministry of Earth Sciences has a very important role in what it calls operational oceanography. That is to build capacities for helping the littoral countries cope with these meteorological challenges, climate change, and so on, and other issues. At multilateral level, again, it's been talked about, and the Prime Minister's speech actually gives a novel concept when he said that it is we are now trying to build a strong grouping around Indian Ocean. Normally, these groupings are land-based, but for the first time, the idea is to develop grouping based on a body of sea. And Indian Ocean Name Association was mentioned. Indian Ocean Naval Symposium is another one, where the Navy chiefs of the member countries of the Indian Ocean Naval Symposium come together to discuss various ways in which the cooperation can be enhanced. And all of these, the Indian Navy plays a very important role. So this is important, and I can actually add that for building this kind of maritime order, you need to develop a very good synergy between the Indian Ocean Rim Association and Indian Ocean Naval Symposium. And of course, you have to link in with other regional organizations like the SARC, like BIMSTEC, like the Gulf Cooperation Council, and the various sub-regional organizations in the African seaboard. Now, in conclusion, I just want to end by saying that the International Institute of Strategic Studies London, in the Statistics Survey 2016, its opening report about the survey of the Strategic Survey of Global Affairs says that, and I quote, "The underpinnings of geopolitics is splintered so much in the past year that the foundation of the global order appear alarmingly weak, unquote. Now, the point actually is that when we talk as to what we can achieve through our cooperation in the Indian Ocean with all the objectives that we have to keep in mind that this is an opportune time for us to do that, because it is, as I said, the times are favorable to us, and we have the capacity, and our leadership is to an extent recognized and supported by many other powers. So this is an opportunity for us, but we also have to remember that this opportunity is not going to last forever, and therefore it requires a new kind of an approach, a greater energy, national energy is required for us to provide that kind of leadership, and even a new kind of diplomacy, because here you find a situation when you do this kind of a collaboration or address challenges, whether traditional and non-traditional, there are two different approaches. When you talk about traditional security threats, you're talking about balance of power. So the two navies may be thinking as to which navy is powerful, which navy is less powerful, and how to think in terms of what you call the zero-sum game. But the same navy, you may collaborate with them in other areas addressing non-traditional security threats. For example, the anti-piracy operation carried out in the Indian Ocean. Now, the Chinese Navy is collaborating with the Indian Navy, and Iranian Navy is collaborating. Iranian Navy was not part of it, but the other navies, Japanese and South Koreans and so on and so forth, they were all coming together to participate in a lot of these operations. So you build, again, that's a different kind of diplomacy, a different kind of mindset is required. So here, there is a kind of a, what I could say, diplomatic nimbleness, that you should be able to prepare yourself institutionally and doctrinally in such a way that you can switch your role from zero-sum to win-win. And that is why, when the Prime Minister talked about a new vision for the Indian Ocean Maritime Order, it actually requires, in a way, a new kind of thinking on the part of all of us. So thank you very much.
For sharing the history of oceans, its importance in the Indian context, the opportunities that lie for India, and challenges and threats faced by various nations. Our next speaker is Ambassador Anup K. Mutkal, a member of the Indian Foreign Services, retired in May 2016 as India's High Commissioner to Mauritius. As a part of his diplomatic career spanning 32 years, he served thrice at the headquarters of the Ministry of External Affairs, handling relations with India's neighborhood, ASEAN region, Russian Federation, and some countries of Central and Eastern Europe, as well as issues relating to human resource development. As part of his 8 assignments abroad, Sir served in different capacities at Indian missions in Mexico, Peru, former Yugoslavia, Belgium, Germany, Austria, and Mauritius. Sir's domain specialization includes maritime security and defense, ocean economy, trade policy and market access, technology, transfer, adaptation and application, energy and transport, human resource management and skill development, development assistance and project implementation. Post-retirement, Sir has been engaged in various voluntary assignments, the important ones being member FICCI Task Force on Blue Economy. Sir, we now request you to kindly come on the stage and address the audience.
Some space to put my folder. Can you push it back?
Yeah.
My colleagues, Ambassador Yogendra Kumar, Sanjay Panda, Dr. Acharya, members of faculty, and you young participants today. My job, in fact, has become very difficult, because after each speaker, I thought of some new points without realizing the next one will cover it. So basically now everything about blue economy, from the policy to the implementation to the challenges to the difficulties to the sustainability part, most of these aspects have really been covered very well. Now I'm thinking, what should I tell you? I thought, let me ask this question. Why suddenly we are discussing oceans everywhere? As the introduction said, I spent 32 years in diplomatic service. My senior colleague Yogendra Kumarji, he spent much longer than I did. And Sanjay has been now in service for close to 2 decades. Sir, do you remember when we were young officers, did we ever go for a conference on oceans? I don't remember. I spent a lot of time next to the ocean. I spent a lot of time dealing with the ocean. I spent a lot of time seeing the implications of mistreatment of ocean. I spent a lot of time analyzing what the ocean can do to us, both for positive and negative. But still, sir, we were not going for ocean conferences, isn't it? There's hardly a discussion for diplomats on oceans, except under the UNCLOS, we were trying to define the laws, and under the International Maritime Organization to fix how the ships should sail and what route they should take. But oceans were not being discussed. Now the question is, why we are discussing oceans now and so much? If you ask me, in the last about 5 or 6 years, I have been attending an ocean conference almost every month. In last 1 year, I have been attending an ocean-related conference literally every 2 weeks. The other day I was wondering, why this ocean suddenly? Every now and then, you are spending time discussing oceans. I thought, let me see what could be the drivers. What are the drivers which have brought us to discuss oceans so much? Some of the drivers, for example, I thought, is it globalization which is forcing us to discuss oceans so much? As Sanjay brought out, then Dr. Acharya brought out, then Ambassador Kumar. In the last 15, 20 years, the way the world has been connected through trade, investment, technology, people, this was exceptional. In fact, it never happened earlier in the history of mankind. As a result, we got so connected with each other, and believe me, most of this connection, most of this substantive connection was coming through the seas, the sea lanes. There was a data, for example, if you look at the trade, which is trade in goods and services, the contribution of trade in the global GDP went up from just about 17% in the 60s to over 50% in 2008. It happened for everyone, including us and including other countries in the developing zone. Is it that we are becoming more dependent on the external sector, and within the external sector, a substantial part is ocean connectivity? Is it that new players are coming into the field? Because there was a time when the ocean space was largely dominated by big players, big powers. Because the other didn't have the capacity. We didn't have the capacity to go into the deep ocean, high seas. We didn't have the capacity to, on defense side, on the technology side, or even understanding the oceans. But in the last about 25, 30 years, more and more players have come into picture to occupy the space. They are now contributing to this thought process and are also asking for their legitimate space in that debate. I'm sure 30 years ago, countries like India would not have that capacity. And today we are an equal partner to a large extent in many facets of how we deal with the oceans. Then the direct benefits of the oceans. In fact, Sanjay mentioned how the blue economy, when you put the asset value of blue economy at $24 trillion and you put the annual value addition at $2.5 trillion, it's a huge cake. Would you not want a share in that? You can't leave it to few powers. Everybody wants to be part of that game. In my view, if you ask me, $24 trillion is a gross underestimation. And $2.5 trillion annual value addition is a gross underestimation. So you want to be there. And with the land-based resources coming to a depletion, there will be a run to the ocean for resources, and you want to be there. Is it the non-conventional? My senior colleague, Ambassador Kumar, discussed about the threats, in fact. Now, there was earlier conventional threats, which means the conventional naval warfare. Now, that, whatever we may say, was much more predictable, much more controllable, and the smaller players had limited role either to regulate it or to control it or to promote it. But today the non-conventional threats can knock at your door irrespective of you being a big power or a small power. So even the smaller countries are required to develop some capacity, at least to defend their near coast. And they want to be there. Is it the ocean health? In fact, earlier speakers spoke about ocean health. There was a time nobody bothered about ocean health. But then suddenly we realized that mistreatment of oceans was reaching a tipping point. With the science-based knowledge about oceans, people started understanding that if this ocean was not treated well, it will come back to us and it can hurt us, and it can really hurt us seriously. My exposure to how the ocean can hurt us came literally in the beginning of my career as a diplomat, when I was posted on the Pacific Ocean coast in Peru, remote area. And those were the days, I'm sure now with the internet, you all have heard about those terminologies. But one day I read the news and there was a message from Delhi. And what was that message? They said, we hear El Nino is developing. Can you please send us a report on El Nino development? Now, believe me, that was the first time I heard about this term called El Nino. I said, but why are you worried about El Nino, which is happening some 30 kilometers from the Peruvian coast? How it's going to affect you? Then I learned, when El Nino happens, there could be drought in India. Can you imagine? Far off place in the Pacific, just 1.5 degree temperature fluctuation, and it can have drought in India. I started wondering, we are probably more connected than what we thought we were. And then there was another interesting exposure to how the ocean can come back to us. There was a town, it was called Ghost Fishing Town. I had never heard about a ghost fishing town. Then we were taken there, and it was a town. There was hardly anyone there. So when we checked what happened to the town, then they explained it was a fishing town. There was an island next to the coast, and this island used to attract a lot of birds. And these birds will stay on that island. As a result, the bird droppings will fall into the ocean water, and these droppings will increase the organic content of the water, which will attract planktons, And these planktons will attract fish, and these people will go and fish, and the fishing town was thriving. God knows, one fine morning ideas would have come to these fishermen that why can't they do a bit more? If they were catching 10, can they do 11? And they went a bit further in reducing the net size and started fishing a bit more, without realizing that one day they crossed the tipping point. The birds stopped coming because no more they had fish in that water. The dropping stopped because the birds were not coming. Because the dropping stopped, there was no organic material. Because there was no organic material, there were no planktons. And because there were no planktons, there was no fish. So the fish disappeared. The birds disappeared. And they also had a factory which was using the bird droppings for conversion into fertilizer. The factory closed. Now you see, and that was my exposure. We were not talking about blue economy in those days, but I was really shocked. And then, of course, when I came to Mauritius, I started understanding how, a whole country, and my colleague Ambassador Panda was in Seychelles, sitting on those tiny islands, you just see there and imagine how the entire nation is dependent on those oceans. Now, if these waters are not looked after, these countries have no future. And that is why, in fact, these small island state SIDS, they went to the UN Conference on Sustainability, and they built on Pauli's argument on blue economy, because Pauli was not differentiating between, he was not taking blue economy to the ocean. Pauli was more basic sustainability thing, where he said zero waste, because he thought we could work with the nature rather than against nature. That was a much more fundamental approach to sustainability. Later on, of course, as Seychelles and then Mauritius, then other small island states, they worked on that idea and they took it to the ocean, right? And they said greening of the oceans was not enough. The oceans have to become blue, right? Which means they have to really become sustainable, because they were facing huge problem. Now, global warming, for example. Now, there was a report about a month ago or something, again El Nino. El Nino, when the temperature went up by 1.5 degrees, the ocean put back into the atmosphere 3 billion tons of carbon dioxide. Can you imagine? Just about 1.5 degrees, and the ocean puts back 3 billion tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Now, we are trying to limit the global warming, in best case scenario 1.5 degrees and most likely 2 degrees. Now just imagine if we have 2 degree ocean warming, what kind of consequences it can have in terms of carbon capture and in terms of oxygen replenishment. It's going to be a huge thing. And then we were discussing before coming for this conference, much more challenging than all this is the impact on loss of biodiversity. You see, 98%, if I'm not wrong, 98% of the life, it does not exist on land. It exists in oceans. And we do not even know it. Only about 95% of ocean is understood. Oh, sorry, only about 5% of the ocean is understood. Now, can you imagine if we start losing those species, if we start losing that biodiversity, what kind of impact it can have on the entire life chain, including humans? So it's a very, very challenging, very, very, I would say, complicated process. And sooner we start to learn about it, sooner we start to respect this, better for humanity. We are not doing any charity to the planet or anybody else. It is meant for us. Now coming to, because my topic first was blue economy and then became a lesser of a blue but a small island states in the Indian Ocean. Now, my previous speakers have really spelt out how critical the Indian Ocean is for us. Not only the trade and the energy supply, but if you count the coastal, 500 million Indians live in the coastal states. You count coastal tourism, fishing, shipping, transport, ports. It's a huge impact on our economy and our future development and the prosperity that we're looking at. Now, what we need? We need peaceful and healthy ocean if we want to achieve our own goals of development and prosperity. How will that happen? Ambassador Kumar mentioned about the naval aspect. Now, can we really do it on our own? He mentioned about piracy. I remember 20 countries. This was a threat where the enemy was known, the location was known, the timing was known, and 20 navies of the world took hell of a lot of time to mitigate that. It's not been eliminated completely. Can we do it alone? Can we ensure that the oceans around us are peaceful and healthy on our own? The answer is no. The answer is no. We have to really work with our partners in the region. We have to create a balance which is in our favor when it comes to defending our oceans against security threat and deterioration of its health. Now, I was asked to limit to small island states in the Indian Ocean. Now, coming to those, because you can't even see them, right? On this map, if I use this thing, I don't know whether it works. How does it work? Yeah, it's here. Now look, Mauritius is somewhere here. You can't even see it, right? Yeah. Then this is Comoros. I will not touch about this. Then this is again Mauritius, Magalig Island. There is Diego Garcia, those Chagos, you must have heard about that. Seychelles, you don't even see, right? Your dot is not there. Then this is Maldives here. Again, you hardly can see it. And Sri Lanka is here. It's not a small island. It's a relatively bigger one. So coming down to small islands like say Mauritius or Seychelles or Maldives. Now look at them. Look at them. Mauritius, tiny thing dot, 2.3 million square kilometers of EEZ. 2.3 million square kilometers. Seychelles, you can't even see on the map. 1.3, if I'm not wrong, Sanjay, is it right? 1.3 million square kilometers of EEZ. If I put together Mauritius, Seychelles, Maldives and Sri Lanka, we are talking about something about 4+ million square kilometers of water. Add to that the Indian waters, we exceed 6 million square kilometers of water. It's a huge thing, right? Can we work with these tiny countries together with them? Because if their waters are peaceful, a large chunk of Indian Ocean will be peaceful. If their waters are healthy, a large chunk of Indian Ocean water will be healthy. Can we work with them? Now again come back to these tiny dots on the map. What is so special about these guys? What exactly they need? Now on their own, these are very small places. Seychelles population of 500,000 or less than 500,000. Yeah, exactly 100,000. Mauritius 1.3 million. Maldives less than 500,000 again. Sri Lanka is relatively big, so I don't count that as a small island. They do not have the threshold on their own. They don't have the scale for having a self-sustaining economy, defense, education, higher education, science and technology. Now, if they don't have it, what do they need? They definitely need a partner, which is much bigger and is friendly, positive, who can provide them what is called an external scale, where they act as a hub or an end or a source, but they are connected with a or a set of larger partners who provide them that scale. Because otherwise I've lived there, Sanjay has lived there. On their own, they do not have those scales for growth and prosperity. They have to necessarily be dependent on others. Mauritius has no source of energy, for example. Now, how will they do higher education and technology? There are hardly any people there. The problem will be more severe in Maldives and in Seychelles. Now, they need somebody to be there. Now, can we be there? Can we fill this gap? Can we fill this deficit and provide these countries a partner they can trust? And believe me, we are not the only one there. We don't have the monopoly over offering help or partnerships. There are others who will be offering their own capacity to them. And some of them may not align with our interest. Now, they find a partner who may not be entirely aligned with our thoughts. What do? You lose a huge chunk of territory to a thought which is not aligned to your thought, right? Why has India, what is the advantage of India to offer this partnership? As Sanjay mentioned, and Ambassador Kumar in a different context, you see, the beauty is that these small islands, these small communities, they do not feel threatened by India. It's a huge country, 1.3 billion people, but we are not threatening. We don't threaten. And there could be a separate lecture, why don't people look at us as threatening? Now, this is a complex phenomenon, which needs a description if later we discuss that thing. But people don't look at Indians and India as threatening. We are seen as a benign partner. And that is why we have this advantage, right? That these small islands will be very happy to work with us. Then our own, sometimes not very ideal, but very pliable, democratic, open, transparent way of working. And sometimes that transparency hurts us, but no, we are in our own way a very transparent, democratic people, in fact. As a result, they don't see much of a hidden agenda. If, for example, Sanjay representing Government of India, even if he has small hidden thing, I will spill the beans. If I don't do it, somebody else will do it. So, they see that this partner, though huge and large, is very transparent. You can't hide your intention beyond a point. And they also believe that we sincerely have a good intention. When, for example, Prime Minister went on his Sagar voyage, covering Sri Lanka, Seychelles, and Mauritius, and Maldives, because of a localized situation, he couldn't go, though it was in the program. I was there, and now we were wondering because we knew that we are going to have a vision on Indian Ocean security and development, right? And I sitting there, I had my fingers crossed, because you say something slightly different, a tiny nation can really be off their mood, right? You have to couch it in an absolutely balanced and positive manner. And we had our fingers crossed how we are going to couch it. And that is what exactly PM did. When he came out with this acronym called SAGAR. This was nothing but Sabka Saath Sabka Vikas, as Sanjay mentioned. Because if you translate Sabka Saath Sabka Vikas into an ocean vision, I think it turns out to Sagar. Sagar is Sabka Saath Sabka Vikas. And not only that, he said it, and people knew that that was not the first time India said it, because it has been part of our history of dealing with other countries and partners in the regions. So they knew that this was continuity of a peaceful, progressive partnership policy of India. Now, how do we translate that into the day-to-day relationship with these countries? I will not go into the larger segment because logically it should come from larger to the smaller, but because of paucity of time, I will not go into that larger thing. But there are, in fact, initiatives not only limited to these small island states, but the entire region, which Sanjay has spelled out to some extent. You mentioned, I should say, political, economic, and other outreach to these islands. That is what you want me to do. Now, you see, when it comes to political outreach, I think these are some of the closest countries to us. There is a very frequent, highest level real political connect. The other days, Ambassador Panda was telling, what the hell, every day there are delegations, There are ministers and ministers and ministers coming. He finds it difficult to manage so many visits. Now you see, interaction amongst political leaders is probably the most important thing you can have in international relations. You can't leave it to the technical people, in fact. The leadership must repeatedly state their vision, and that is what we do. That is what we do. In fact, so much so, again, going back to Mauritius, when Prime Minister took over, and there was a proposal to invite neighboring countries, basically SAARC, and then somebody mentioned from Mauritius, what about us? As Sanjay, you mentioned that they are our neighbors. He said, oh, what about me? And Prime Minister on telephone said, come along, you are our friend. Can you imagine? So there is a genuine affection for our partners, our neighbors, and they know it. Now, when it comes to, say, security and defense, which is because their concern is, in case of trouble, who will defend them? Because the tiny people, they don't even have their armies and navies and forces. Now, is there anyone who will say, okay, don't worry, if there is something happens, we are there? No, you have to underwrite some sort of an assurance that if you face difficulty, we will be there, right? And that is what we do with these islands in terms of providing hardware they need, be it the OPVs or the fast interceptor boats or whatever. We give them training. We do a lot of capacity building for these people, right? And in some cases, we provide them the helicopters for their aerial surveillance. We give them all kinds of equipment and things, which adds to their capacity. And then we spend a lot of energy and resources for doing joint monitoring of their EEZ. It's a huge amount of money that we spend, right? And we do their hydrographic surveys. Whatever they need, in fact, the underlying principle here is you say what you need and we will do it, right? We never say no to these partners. In fact, it applies to others also, but since I'm talking about these smaller countries, then comes people to people. Now, people to people for me is the bedrock of any relationship. Leadership alone without people support will not be able to sustain it beyond a point. You have to take it down to people, in fact. And with these islands again, these are huge people-driven goodwill. People-driven goodwill. What do we do? In fact, in the introductory remarks, you mentioned about these Mauritians coming here and then going back and becoming ministers. We give them large number of scholarships for regular courses in Indian universities. We provide them large number of ITEC slots for capacity building. We have all kinds of schemes for bringing youngsters to India to learn about India, to see what we can do together. When I went to Mauritius, 1/3 of the Mauritian cabinet had studied in India. Now, can you imagine when 1/3 of the cabinet is Indian alumni? Many of them would be from your institution. Most of the job is done, isn't it? Most of the job is done. Economic. Now, with Sri Lanka, we have an FTA, which is the backbone of their trading arrangement. We are the largest partner for them. In fact, when I talked about, I'll come to that hubbing point again. Hubs, for example, Sri Lankan port, which is a success story in the region, but almost 90% of the container traffic is driven by Indian trade. If India was not there next door to them, they would not have those containers coming through the Sri Lankan ports. Now, they know it. They know it that for their own growth and prosperity, there is a huge benefit of having such a large, benign, friendly market next door called India. Right? Now, we have to really work on these strengths with, what would I say, without any element of arrogance, with moderation, with maturity. And these people know that this is a huge merit in having India next door. Mauritius, for example. I'm sure you've all heard about the double taxation, and then we are working on the comprehensive economic and trade agreement with them. Now, there is a very, very close knit economic cooperation between our two countries. There are jobs which are created because of this relationship in Maldives, and I'm sure in Seychelles we are doing. Then Indian investments. Considering their sizes, there is a huge amount of Indian investment in all these countries. In fact, Sri Lanka, Mauritius, in fact, 40% of their domestic retailing in hydrocarbons is controlled by Indian oil. In fact, MRPL is the exclusive supplier of energy to that country, right? Why? Because we give the guarantee that whatever it takes, we will make sure that you never run out of energy, in fact, right? State Bank of India, Bank of Baroda, LIC, National Insurance, you name it. Then we, as I was talking about hubs, they look at India as a great source of turning into a regional hub for higher education, a regional hub for maybe petroleum storage and supply, a regional hub even for developing a port facility, which is called the consolidation port facility in the region. We are working on all those issues. There is, under the development partnership, India has done huge amount of commitment for the region and for these countries. I'm sure you've all heard about India-Africa Forum arrangement, under which, in fact, last summit when I was here, India announced $10 billion worth of additional credit over and above the existing lines of credit. We announced something about $600 million worth of grants. And in addition to that, bilaterally, in fact, for Sri Lanka, I think, let me see if I could give you some figures. Yeah, for example, for Sri Lanka, our total commitment in terms of grants and loans, etc., is $2.7 billion. For Mauritius, it's $1 billion. For Maldives, it's $128 million. For Seychelles, it's about $60 million. These figures might have increased, in fact, because slightly outdated data. Now, that is what we are. That is what we are doing for generating a goodwill in the region. Because at the end of the day, if you want peace in the entire region, you need the goodwill of those players. Goodwill of those players. There are challenges. Of course, there are challenges. I'm sure you've heard about the initiatives called String of Pearls and the Belt and Road initiatives and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, it will depend on how we balance the basket in our favor. And it has to be in the favor of our partners also. Can we create that kind of relationship where both the partners feel they have benefited? And that is what we are doing. That is what the policy is. And I'm sure we'll continue on that path. And finally, before I close, since there was a reference to this FICCI task force, of which I'm a member. In fact, talking of blue economy, what we discovered was that somehow the message was not trickling down to the business. Now, you can talk every day about blue economy, but unless the business, they appreciate the whole thing, unless they take on board the blue economy concepts, nothing will change. For example, when it comes to pollution or messing up with the environmental degradation, this was also the act of the same machinery. We started exploiting the resources in an unsustainable manner, and now we are facing the consequences. Now, the same machinery must understand that we can't do it anymore. And our idea in this was, because we thought the business was feeling as if blue economy was coming as another regulation to clip their wings, where we'll tell them, don't do this, don't do that, you can't do this, if you do this, this will happen. They don't like it. The business doesn't like clipping their wings. So they were apprehensive about this idea. Is it coming as another restriction on their freedom, that we are putting more regulations in place? But that's not true. That's simply not true. In fact, I was discussing with Ambassador Kumar, there were, in fact, if you look at the history of global negotiations, we lost out on many things because we thought they were going against us. And since we did not take part in those negotiations, they went against us. Our idea was, take the message to business, talk to them, ask them how they look at blue economy and what are their apprehensions. And this report, which is titled Blue Economy Vision 2025, Harnessing Business Potential for Indian INC and International Partners. Now, this is probably the first time the blue economy debate has been taken directly to the business, in fact. It covers all. It covers the legal part, it covers the operational part, it covers the opportunities, in fact. If you see there, these are local opportunities, international opportunities, and it also spells out the way forward. What exactly needs to be done for mainstreaming this message? It should not remain purely a debate for the experts and the technical people, in fact. This must become a realization by everyone that there is opportunity, and if you don't prepare in time, then it will become a barrier. Now, don't blame the opportunity if you don't prepare. All opportunities, if you're not prepared, at some stage will become barrier for you. So the whole idea here is, let's not let's not allow this perception to seep into business that blue economy is another restriction on them. It's not a restriction, it's an opportunity. Since you are young business people of tomorrow, please take this message. There are opportunities worth trillions of dollars, but unless you are blue, they are not available to you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for sharing with us your rich experience and pointing it out that there are so many factors that interact when we talk about the ocean and the plethora of opportunities that lie and a possibility of India as a partner to various islands and explore so many opportunities of the Indian Ocean and beyond. We would now request all our speakers to kindly take their seats on the stage. We now request the audience to kindly take their seats. The floor is now open for question and answers.
Good afternoon, sir. Thank you so much for the great educative experience that you had. It's my honor to listen to all the diplomats personally. So my questions to you, Sanjay sir. How do you think India, what role does India have in having Seychelles as a partner, and what we can do to develop their blue economy?
Well, am I audible? Yeah, a very interesting question, but I think what Ambassador Anup Mudgal mentioned, that also applies to Seychelles. You see, it's a very small country. It's a country of 93,000 people, 115 sprawling islands. I mean, if you see in 1.3 million EZ, whatever aspirations they have, what are their main economic, you see, their lifeline are twofold: fisheries and tourism, and high-end tourism, because they cannot have backpackers coming in. Now for this, with islands, resorts spread all around, and for fisheries, they have to ensure that their fisheries stock is not depleted. So sustainable fishing practices are there. They don't want their marine ecosystem spoiled. Secondly, they are facing challenges. You see, they were in the forefront of piracy. When the piracy menace was there, everybody looked and tried to find out where Seychelles is located in the map. But India was always there. You see, when they attained their independence in 1976, India went to join in the celebrations to welcome them to the Committee of Nations with a huge was larger than the Seychelles contingent. We were celebrating their independence, and India has always been there. In fact, there were coup attempts, there were mercenary attacks, and India has always been there by the side of Seychelles. And this has continued, irrespective. And that they recognize, and their defense assets, whatever we have done, and we have done it very quietly. It's not that we are telling them, look, this is what we have done. What have you done for us in return? We don't ask. And then there is EZ surveillance, their exclusive economic zone. The threat, there are traditional threat, and as Ambassador Yogendra Kumar mentioned, the non-traditional threat has huge significance now. You see, there are the poachers, the illegal, unregulated fishing, the IIU fishing, what is called. And they don't have the means to control this. The human trafficking, drug trafficking, in fact, drugs major menace there. So all this have to be controlled if they are blue economies, which is effectively sustainable development of their resources and optimal utilization of their oceanic space. And that is where India has, as a responsible partner, not as a big brother, but as a responsible partner, has been with their side. And that is what we want, and that is what we are happy in doing. And of course, I mean, if you say, why is it strategically important for us to do that? Of course it is strategically important for us to do that. I shouldn't mince any words, but say that our presence, our footprint, growing footprint in the Indian nation is, in the Indian Ocean, is probably to balance the growing footprint of maybe another power, which my ambassador colleagues could spell out further. Thank you.
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Ruchika. I'm from Junior MBA Agribusiness Batch. Sir,
No, I'm just actually, I can't see. It's not we are avoiding
sir,
you.
My question is related to the Setu Samudram project, which is being proposed by UPA 1 government in the 2005, and which is having strategic, politically, socially, culturally, economically, and environmentally, it is so important. And even after 12 years, Government of India is not taking any initiatives for the project, because it creates a lot of job opportunities for the Indians, where Sri Lanka and other countries are taking advantage of the port in Colombo. Why Indian government is not taking the project seriously?
See, there's a public forum. The camera is pointing out, so I'll have to be very diplomatic. It is nobody's guess which part of the country you come from, but I can tell you that Government of India takes it very seriously.
No, sir. My question is, it's not. I don't want to hurt anybody, but the thing is, but the government is having so much opportunity that it can build a port near in the southern part of India, where it creates infrastructural jobs can be created in technical, non-technical stuff, and India can take advantage of the position where India is located.
Point taken.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I wish you quickly finish your course here, and I want to see some private initiative in doing that. See, you have to. I'll tell you a very clear answer. I'll give you a very clear answer. Now, if you're talking about the bridge, that why you're not building the bridge bridge can be built if both sides are comfortable with. There are sensitivities involved, so it's better we do not discuss about it there. But it is, we want to always move vis-a-vis Sri Lanka at a pace that Sri Lanka is comfortable with. Do not impose your wishes. Be a responsible neighbor. There are sensitivities. So the project that you are referring to, which India also feels has tremendous economic opportunities, but it has to be with the approval and with the comfort of the Sri Lankan side. Coming to the port development, you see, the connectivity is something which is extremely important. I mean, we know that Colombo port draws its sustenance from India. We try to build connectivity by having Colombo, Tuticorin, connecting the two ports.
and for passenger traffic and cargo traffic. It was stopped after 1.5 years because it was not found to be commercially viable. Now there is a proposal of reviving it after doing a little bit of work, trying to find out how to match the cargo traffic and the passenger traffic. And then there are proposals to build ACZ, the special economic zones, in Sri Lanka and connecting with India. But most importantly, we are now negotiating what is called ETCA, Economic and Technical Cooperation Agreement with Sri Lanka, likely to be signed end of this year. But I can tell you that once it is signed, it opens up a lot of opportunities. But along with these opportunities, there are challenges. I'm putting it the other way around. When you say with challenges, there are opportunities. With these opportunities, there are challenges for the simple reason that there are apprehensions. There are apprehensions that once this happens, maybe a small country will get flooded by India. But it is actually not the case. But then that is why I mention again that India can only move on certain areas where Sri Lanka is comfortable with and at a pace that Sri Lanka is comfortable with. But your point is very well taken. There is a huge untapped potential. There's a huge untapped potential. And don't look at the government. It's the private sector. There has to be the model. It has to be a PPP model. It is something which has to be tapped. But thank you for pointing this out. It's a very valid point that you make.
Good afternoon, panelists. My name is Vipul Kumar. I'm from the senior batch. It is a bit rich to put a number on the value that ocean can offer us and use the words like sustainable and exploitation in the same sentence. And as has been the case historically, when a commercial venture starts giving us returns, the safety and security does take a back seat. And going forward with this, we would be staring at nothing but a forced oceanic biodiversity abortion. So, looking at this way, I mean, how difficult does it get to get the big players on board with provisions for the safety and security of biodiversity, and how difficult does diplomacy become then? The question is open to anyone.
Addressed to anyone or it's anyone?
No, you want the government point of view. You see, I'll tell you something. If do you want the government point of view or a transparent, fair, and okay, you want to see our point of view.
That doesn't mean the government is not transparent. You see, as I mentioned, in fact, and also Sanjay mentioned when he went for the UN conference for the oceans, there is definitely the same apprehension as you mentioned, that how can you talk about exploitation and sustainability in the same phrase? If you exploit, it automatically is not exactly in the same category as sustainability. But you know, there are practical ground projects where you can just little tweak the technology that you're using, the methodology that you're using, and the project becomes more sustainable. I'm not talking about going back to Pauli's concept of zero waste, because he's talking about how the nature works. Because if you look at the nature, there is no waste in the nature. Nature doesn't produce waste. So he's saying take that idea from the nature and start working that we don't produce waste. But believe me now, I have been attending these conferences and practical meetings with the business through the multilateral channels and bilateral channels. There is now a realization that be sustainable to the extent you can Now, of course, you will not really go completely broke only because you want to be sustainable. Because even to take your bread home is also part of sustainability. Now, nobody will forego taking bread home because they want to be sustainable. But can you take your bread home but still be sustainable? That's the issue. And that is where the agreement is now converging. That the world feels while you have a right to grow, you have right to be prosperous, you have right to be comfortable, but can we also be sustainable at the same time? Right? I can give you many examples where actually work is being done, but I think because of time.
I'll quickly give you one example, which is a problem that I'm dealing with in part of in my official capacity. You know, the problem which we face with, there's one major issue that we have with Sri Lanka, which is on the fishermen issues. Our fishermen cross the maritime boundary, the IMBL, the boundary line, and they get into the Sri Lankan waters, and then they get caught, and then that's an issue that we are confronted with. You see, but the main issue here is the fishing practice, the bottom trawling. You know what is bottom trawling? Bottom trawling and pair trawling. I mean, two trawlers come side by side with a net. They scoop the ocean floor out and later on see, I mean, what catch they have got. But they are totally devastating the marine ecology, the marine biodiversity. But they are doing this in the present. Now, what you're saying, exploitation and sustainability. This is what we can exploit our marine resources, but we do it sustainably. So there is balance. There's a balance. And there's another question also. You see, if you do not fish, that again creates pollution. I mean, you have to fish, but you should not overfish. Yes.
I think the issue is a little larger because this is a new area of economic growth, not just for India but globally. Therefore, it cannot be fully exploited and used unless there is a government initiative in terms of creating the infrastructure, in terms of creating a regulatory regime, in terms of creating sufficient tariff incentives, and even other kind of subsidy by which you can generate a whole new kind of economic activity. So this kind of activity covers the entire spectrum. It is low tech, small fishermen, and high tech. I give one example. I mean, for example, we are talking about the coastal development zones, which is part of a government initiative. Now, if you leave it to private sector, unless there is a proper framework, they will not be able to do that, because they are not looking at it from that point of view. But for example, the studies have shown that Xiamen, for example, in China, the coastal area zone, coastal area development zone that they have done, they realized that for $1 they invested on that, their return is $4. So it is actually scientific and a rational use of your resources by which you create infrastructure. Another example, fishing. You mentioned about fishing. Now it's a well-known fact that fish stock has been depleted. It needs to be renewed. Now renewal means you need to bring in new technology, new methods of work, new business models. You know, people are talking about what are called the smart oceans. That you have the sensors put in different in the ocean so that you actually on a real-time basis are able to give the wave conditions, the current, the temperature, and all that, and thereby you're able to actually pinpoint the areas where fishing can be much more easily done. The other thing is that if you are unnecessarily exploitative and wasteful, then the other aspects of the economy you cannot develop. Tourism, biodiversity tourism is a huge sector, but you cannot develop it if you are destroying biodiversity. So it really requires a major effort where this kind of a framework is required, infrastructure is required. At the same time, a certain degree of sensitization, because the business people, it has to be shown to them, it has to be proven to them that this activity is actually quite viable. So, for example, seafood. I mean, the Ministry of Earth Sciences are doing an inventory of different kinds of seafood available in different parts of Mictofit, like it's called Mictofit, They do a kind of inventory what is available. So you are actually developing new resources. So that's the kind of approach which is required. And of course, the fact of the matter is that why are you doing that? Why are you talking blue economy today? Because it's not that we've not had ocean-based economies. We had it from the beginning of civilization. It is just that the way we have abused the ocean resources, now actually they become counterproductive. So our coastal economies are declining, they're decaying because of the fact that we have actually overused that.
Business can also add it,
I probably address your question in a different perspective, getting out of the ocean economy. You basically question the attitude of the business, whether sustainability and exploitation continue together. If you really look at today, there has been a significant change in the mindset of business. If you go to the United States of America, there you are finding today the government is taking an initiative to get out of climate changes, get out of the different restrictions, what was being prescribed on business to manage itself sustainably, whereas businesses are walking out against the government. Elon Musk has moved out before the committee was disbanded on this issue itself. So the realization in the business today that something different needs to be done is very much there. In case of ocean economy, I totally agree with you, it's a new area. So that regulation and prescriptions need to be done. But by and large, excepting for the old age economy like petroleum products, who are all coal-based power generation, who continue to be exploitative, there is a big group of industry who want to do it in a different way.
In fact, you see, there is an estimate in 30 years' time, ocean-based production and employment will exceed the land-based productivity and employment. We have to really, and similarly, for example, the renewables is a wonderful example where solar energy costs now comparable to your thermal power. Can you imagine? Lower than that. Yes, lower than that. Lower now.
Good afternoon, sir. So my question is to, so over here. Oh, sorry. Okay. So my question is to Anup, sir. Since you've been going to all the meetings regarding the ocean trade and the blue economy meetings, and the question is, within 10 to 20 years, the entire Arctic region is going to be open for shipments for around 6 months or more than that. So we are looking at a trade. Yeah, it's already being opened. So we are looking at a trade, at least 1/3 of the trade that used to happen through the Suez Canal and the Cape of Good Hope is going to shift to that side. So how are we dealing with this kind of situation of such a transshipment loss? What are the strategies the government is taking in?
I think this potential is still overdrawn. At the moment, because for that kind of route to develop, its economic viability has not been tested yet for a variety of reasons. First of all, the predictability of the seasonal availability is actually limited, and secondly, it's not very easy because of the weather patterns are changing so rapidly. The second thing is that what you find the infrastructure along that that's the Arctic sea route is not yet properly developed. It is at the moment more from the point of the strategic interest that people want to be the first, they want to put the foot in the door. Really from that point of view, that is happening. So for, in a way it's a bit of a chicken and egg kind of situation. You have infrastructure and then trade develops. But infrastructure cannot develop unless it's become economically viable. This is a very early phase in that, and therefore the routes that we have, they are still very robust and very much available as of now. So I think it is early, because what people are saying so far, that all these calculations actually were overly optimistic, and we don't know really whether to what extent actually it is fully viable. That's the main point.
The but just to add, you see there are many other proposals which are on the table at this point. And the Chinese are contemplating and negotiating with Thailand, for example, opening a small channel so that they cross without and bypass Malacca Strait. If that happens, that will be a game changer. That will be a game changer. So there's options. I mean, there's creative solutions will always be there, but that doesn't take away from our major focus, and priorities, blue economy, and that doesn't take away from that.
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Arnab Goswami and I am from the junior agribusiness batch. My name is Arnab Goswami and I am from the junior agribusiness batch. So my question to you is, the French Polish...
Question or you want to answer?
It's both, sir. Both. So my question is addressed to Mr. Mudgal. The French Polynesian government has struck a deal to build the world's first floating city by 2019, and they've done this because of the rising threat of they being submerged in the oceans by 2050.
Can you just, repeat this again? Is the Mauritian government's initiative you're talking about?
Yeah, the French Polynesian government. Yeah, the French Polynesian government has made a deal to build the world's first floating city by 2019, and this they've done due to the rising threat of their being submerged by 2050. Now this floating city, in my opinion, will truly realize the ideals of blue economy, as it will be completely self-sustainable. So my question is, can such an idea be applied to a country where the resources are getting scarce, cities are getting more crowded, and if such an idea catches on, what will an international border truly mean? If there are, because if countries like Mauritius also, for example, if Maldives is said to be, it will be depleted, it will be under the sea by 2050, as is being said. So, what do you think is the idea? How feasible do you think is the idea of a fully self-sustainable floating city? Yeah, that's my question. Thank you.
You see, somebody said these islands are unsinkable ships, and then they will be now sinkable cities. I think, if you look at the technology, in fact, the technology is trying to explore many possibilities for dealing with these challenges and finding solutions. And this is also one of the, technology vision. If there is a threat of sea level rising and land being submerged, can we have floating alternatives? If they can have, good luck. But this is again, as you mentioned about the Arctic route, this is a very futuristic kind of thing, right? If you ask me, they would be better alternatives than creating floating cities. There are other floating facilities which many countries consider, small island states especially. For example, when I was in Mauritius, there was a thinking, rather than building the storage and bunkering on land, can we have a floating storage and bunkering facility? Now, yeah, exactly. That makes a lot of sense in a way. But then when we discussed that whole issue, the amount of challenges it had, it was not an easy solution to land-based storage and bunkering. Because if you take such massive storage onto the high seas, you know the amount of risk you are facing there? And just imagine the accident possibility of such a facility will be much more than the viable alternative that you are searching for. And that is why, in fact, they did not really move forward on this idea, because somebody came out with this technology option. So the same will be with floating cities, in fact. Their vulnerability to natural phenomena will be hugely serious. So While, okay, good ideas, but I think these are still kind of initial dreaming of the technological interventions. We'll see when it happens.
I think it's really in the realm of speculation that it's rather early to say how exactly this might shape up as a feature of the global order. Because under the UN Convention Law of the Sea, if there is a kind of a settlement which emerges, in that case it requires recognition under that convention. Any island, for example, discovered, that it has to be identified. Because basically from that they determine the maritime zone around it, what kind of water around it can it claim to be its territory, and what water it can claim exclusive exploitation, so on and so forth. Rather early to say what's going to happen with this fancy idea, but it's viable. But the point still remains that if the sea level is rising, then this issue actually is a challenge of a different kind, and that I think the international community will have to address at some point. But if there is a larger awareness and greater international effort, I think perhaps the situation will not arise. Because minor rise in sea level, you can always insulate yourself by building dikes, and there are many other ways in which you can do that kind of thing. But if it reaches a stage when, hypothetically speaking, let's say a whole nation sort of goes underwater, so to say, in that case perhaps that could be a completely new situation. I hope it will rise.
Sir, can I? One last question. Hi. Good afternoon, panelists. First of all, thanks for keeping sustainable development goals at the base of development of blue economy. My name is Bharat Juyal, and I am the final year student of MBA in Energy and Environment. So, my question is to Ambassador Anup Mudgal. Sir, you briefly touched upon the communication part in your address, and my question was, I believe that in order to execute the technical, financial, and legal capacity that we have, we need to have proper communication, both in terms of internal and external. So what I wanted to ask is, when you communicate a vision to your team, so what do you keep as a KPI for that? Means how should a measurable vision be, and considering the diverse nature of stakeholders involved in the blue economy?
You see, that is why in fact we thought, let's take this idea beyond technical people, in fact. Experts, so-called experts and technical people, because the discussion has been going on in that circle for several years now. And the others were watching, those actual stakeholders who are going to implement these ideas, they were watching the whole thing from the margins, right? And more or less kind of looking at this phenomena, is it going to threaten us? That is why, in fact, in the process of the task force, we expanded the whole thing, right? And believe me, the same thing is happening in the EU efforts on blue economy, OECD efforts on blue economy, and finally the UN effort on blue economy, IORA effort, right? Where, in fact, people are now talking to all stakeholders. Sometimes when you have more stakeholders, reaching an agreement becomes a bit more difficult. But I think it's worth it, because an agreement which you reach through consensus, consulting others, will be more sustainable, and that is an element, part of the blue economy. So, as my other panelists mentioned, this is something which is still kind of evolving. I'm a biologist. If you ask me, I can see the complexity of the whole idea, right? And I know the answers are not going to be simple. But my belief is that even if you take small steps towards sustainability, it's better than taking no step towards sustainability. I'm sure you saw this year. There's something called the Earth Overshoot Day. Did you see the Earth Overshoot Day? This was 2nd of August, I think, this year, or 2nd of September? 25th August. Now, every year, you exhaust the capacity of the planet in August. It used to be in 70s, it used to be in December, which means whatever the capacity of the Earth was, you exhausted the capacity in December in 70s. And we are in 2017, 2017, and in the month of August, you exhausted the resources of Earth. And this has been going on since 1970s. Can you imagine 50 years of overshooting the Earth's capacity? And we will reach the tipping point the day we overshoot in first 6 months. Therefore, while we know it's a complex process, while we know that it will require a lot of technological intervention, while we know that it may not happen tomorrow, but I think we must carry this message. Do what you can do today. At least do that much. There are some simple solutions to sustainability, but we are ignoring even those simple solutions. That is why, for example, you have all the countries putting a deadline when they will phase out the internal combustion engine. It's a revolutionary step that beyond that time, we will not have internal combustion engine, right? Now, that means there is a realization in the industry now that what they are doing is not sustainable, and if they don't become sustainable, they will not be able to do what they're doing. It's your choice. Blue economy, for me, means good business. You don't want to do good business, you will not be in business anymore.
Okay, now since there are no questions, I have a question for them.
Okay.
Okay. Since we're talking about blue economy, how many of you have heard of blue whale? Okay, I haven't heard a lady answer. Can you please say what is it? Yeah, please. Okay, thank you. See, this is the problem. Blue whale is a poor animal which is much maligned. And you are focused. You are all focused. We are expecting you to take care of how much 1.3 trillion with your ideas, and you are describing blue whale as a game. You see, blue whale is a marine species, is a mammal which has lot to contribute for blue economy, and you have to take care of blue whale sustainably. Now please don't describe it as a game. And if you do that, then this entire exercise we did today will come to a lot. We have a lot of faith on you.
Thank you to all the speakers for interacting with the audience and dedicating time to answer each and every question. It was an honor to have all the dignitaries share their knowledge and rich insights with us today. We would now call upon Deputy Director, SIIB, Dr. Prakash Rao, sir, to give the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Ananita and Adira. As we come to the culmination of the annual Leadership Series 2017, one often used to wonder how important the Indian Ocean region was. To many of us, I think this connect came in, as rightly said by Mr. Sanjay Panda, that it had the word Indian in it, and perhaps the only ocean that has the word Indian in it. And in some sense, I think for us, that connect was the only reason why we thought Indian Ocean was important. But I think at the end of this session, we now realize that it's not just about India being in it, but much more than that. And significantly, I think our speakers have given us that understanding about how this region is going to play a very important role, not just from a business point of view, geopolitically, culturally, and perhaps for times to come as well. It's my privilege now to offer a vote of thanks for Leadership Series 2017. At the outset, I would like to express my deep gratitude to Mr. Sanjay Panda, Joint Secretary, IOR, Ministry of External Affairs, Chief Guest for the event, for sharing his thoughts on a very critical and geopolitically important region, the IOR. So your presence has not only enhanced our understanding of the close ties India has had with several countries in the region, but also in sharing a vision of the blue economy and how it actually links with the private sector more importantly. Sir, thank you very much for your presence here. We are really honored with your presence. I'm thankful to Mr. Shomo Acharya, founder and chairman eTrans Solutions Private Limited, for presenting his views, and in terms of really bringing that industry perspective. As a business school, I think while we are trying to understand how important the Indian Ocean region is, it also is really important for all the students to know how businesses can really work, and the kind of data that he shared on how you can really do business in the Indian Ocean region really is going to help many of us in the future. I mean, it gives us a very different perspective about why or how important the region is all about. And not only that, the blue economy in a very meaningful way. Thank you, Mr. Acharya. I think we are really delighted to have you here. Thank you so much. I'm grateful to Ambassador Yogendra Kumar, former Indian ambassador to the Philippines and keynote speaker for today's events, for his views on blue economy and, more importantly, maritime security. He touched upon maritime security as such an important issue, given that there are probably, I think, if I remember right, 21 countries in the Indian Ocean rim. It's also important to understand why security concerns are so important in the region, and I think he brought that point very eloquently in terms of maritime security, anti-piracy related issues. Ultimately, all of them affect businesses today, and how as a region, country should really focus on what is called a just maritime order. There are several laws in that region, there are several complexities, there are unique ethnic and cultural diversities, countries are different, but I think as a region we need to come together, and I think Ambassador Yogendra Kumar brought that out very beautifully. Thank you, sir, for actually talking to us on this. I'm indeed grateful to Ambassador Anup Mudgal, former Indian ambassador and High Commissioner to Mauritius. And given that fact that this discussion started in the morning when Dr. Vidya talked about how Muzumdar sir started Symbiosis on the very basis of Mauritius, I think the dialogue on Mauritius became very helpful with your presence here, sir. Also, a large Indian diaspora exists in many of these countries. Some of us do not realize that many of these Indian Ocean countries actually have a lot of Indians or people who have gone from India and settled abroad there in those countries, probably citizens of those countries today, but the connect to India is very strong even today. And so your entire effort to build partnerships about trying to say why the small island developing states or the small island states, how India can contribute to the the economic growth of the small island states was very beautifully brought out by you. And it's not being seen as India as a threat, but more importantly, how you can actually contribute to these economies, however small they are. Thank you, sir, for your thoughts on this issue. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Vidya Yeravdekar, Pro-Chancellor, Symbiosis International University, for her constant support and guidance and inspiring us to host the annual leadership series every year, more importantly on such very interesting themes and regions. I'm also grateful to Dr. Rajni Gupte, Vice Chancellor, Symbiosis International University, for her constant encouragement and support for an event of this nature. As some of you might not know, it was during her tenure as Director SIB that the leadership series started, and today we actually feel very proud that this series is becoming a very successful event. My special thanks to Dr. Asmita Chitnis, Director SIB, for her leadership and support right through the organizational stage of this event. I think we have really endured, we are thankful to you for actually ensuring that we have come up with a great event like this. And finally, a very big thank you to the leadership series team, ably led by Dr. Suchita Jha, Assistant Professor, SIIB, the SIIB administration, faculty colleagues, students and staff who have worked very hard to put together a very wonderful event today. Without their support, and cooperation, an event of this nature would not have been possible. And of course, the student team working very hard, back end, and I know what it means to put together an event of this nature. Thank you, students, so much for this. Thank you all once again, and have a great day ahead.
Thank you, sir. We now request all our dignitaries and faculty members to kindly join us for lunch near the foyer area. Thank you. All the students are requested to remain seated while the dignitaries and faculty members leave.